Hi, welcome to another episode of Stories Behind the Needlework. Today I'm going to be telling you about this casket right here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit. So this is like a fantastic finish of mine, and I'll be telling you a little bit about the design process that we went through, myself and Noah Caney, in order to design this cabinet here beside me as part of a larger project called Cabinet of Curiosities. And I will show you a few other finishes that are inside of it, as well as a little piece of haul, which leads to a much bigger story that I'll be talking about in some future episodes. I'll also be showing you really up close pictures of the embroidery and of some of the threads that I had made in order to be able to make this piece of embroidery. So how this came about, this is called the Four Seasons Casket. It's kind of a really long story. It goes over a decade back. I had been working as an engineer, and I was on a project that was really, really intense, and I injured myself on the job. And I lost all of the use or the feeling in my right hand. And you can imagine, as an embroiderer, that was terrifying, completely terrifying for me. So I had to stop embroidering at all and using computers, picking up my child, everything for 2 years to see whether or not we could rehabilitate the nerves that went all the way down my hand. And then in the end, I had to have actually quite a bit of surgery through here. During that time frame, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to embroider again. And I kind of came to the conclusion that if I was able to embroider again, and in fact after the surgery I couldn't even move this finger at all. I had to go through extensive physical therapy to retrain my brain how to control my index finger. I realized that I had to kind of stop doing embroidery that was, I don't want to say inconsequential, but not as important as other things that I wanted to do. You know, we all have those things in our lives that we kind of like someday I'm gonna do this. And that someday for me was then. And I was in my mid-30s at that time. I actually went to an EGA conference and I did the last project before my surgery, and I didn't know if it was the last project I'd ever do. I was embroidering like mad. People were like, oh, I don't know about that girl that was sitting next to, and she was just like working away. Well, they didn't know it might have been the last embroidery that I did. Unfortunately, it was not. But I do have to take long breaks from my embroidery all the time to deal with the long-term injury that I sustained. But because of that, I decided that I would only do projects that meant a great deal to me, or that were at the complicated level that I wanted to do. And so everything that I do, all my embroideries are in service of something large that I'm excited about. And that's how I got to doing the caskets, because I knew I wanted to make one. I know a lot of women are interested in making an embroidered cabinet. If they've ever seen a real one from the 1600s, they just fall in love with them and they want to make them. And so I knew that I had to bring a lot of people with me, because some of the parts that you need to make in order to make a really good one, you need to make in volume. But I did have the engineering skills to do that, so I kind of put a lot of things aside, and it was on my bucket list, and I said, I'm going to make a casket. I'm going to make a casket. So at this point, this is actually, in terms of just a fantastic finish, this is actually my opus. This is my best piece of work that I've ever accomplished in life as an embroiderer. And it took me 36 months to embroider, so that's 3 years. And I was embroidering at a pretty good clip, because I was teaching it as a project to a whole bunch of women and men, and I had to keep producing so that the instructions could be done on time. So let me talk a little bit about why they're so cool, why they're so interesting. I mean, you can see it, it's pretty neat. And I know you've seen other people's, like Rachel Kinnison and Janet Brantz and Katie Strachan. Those are all absolutely fabulous pieces of my students, and I'm so thrilled that everybody has been able to see their pieces. But why are they fun? Unlike other embroideries, which are flat, it's three-dimensional, and so you can imagine interacting with it. I think that the three-dimensionality of the object is something that really attracts people's attention, as well as the fact that often they are more three-dimensional in terms of their actual parts of them, like the dresses being able to be lifted up and seeing things underneath it. And that really, everybody always likes to take a doll and lift up the skirt. I don't know why we all do that. We want to see the feet, what it is about that, but we all do. And so that, intrigues us. But it's actually when you open it up and you interact with the parts inside, like the people did, 400 almost years ago. They themselves opened the key to put something inside and pull the drawer out. And so you're kind of taken back in time to what could have they put in the drawers? And when you find out that these were primarily made by girls about 12, 13, 14 years of age, you realize that they were at that cusp. When I open one of these up and I show people all the secret drawers inside, they always suck it in, kind of thing, hoping that there's something inside of the secret drawer, because it brings us back to that time frame when we're about 12 years old and we found a feather and we've imbued it with magical properties, right? This little feather or a rock or a shell, something that we just are intrigued with as a 12-year-old child, that cusp of being, everything is magic beforehand, and then I'm becoming an adult right afterwards, right at that point. And so you bring your mind back to that, and it just is magical. And anytime I show, it doesn't matter if it's a person who loves needlework or somebody who's just come into my home and I start pulling out the drawers, they all go like this and they lean in. So it's like interacting with the past. And I think that's why people really, really like the caskets. Yeah, like samplers, you can't really engage with them as easily as you can engage with something like this. It's like getting into the shoes of the maker, being able to walk in the shoes of the woman who made it, or the young woman who made it, and realizing that they were a lot like us, right? They collected little things. I've had the opportunity to see some caskets that actually had little things in the drawers, and they were that kind of thing that you would expect. Part of a starfish, a rock, a shell, a marble, those kind of things that a little child will collect. And you're right there and you realize these aren't these historical figures from the past that, had wild beliefs and things. These are just people like us. So let me talk a little bit about the design process. When I wanted to design this particular piece, I contacted Noah Caney, who is an architect and graphic designer who I work with quite a bit. He's a maker, and his wife is also an embroiderer, as well as his sister-in-law, who I know very well, also an embroiderer. And so he's very familiar with all of the embroideries and what I mean when I'm talking about things. And we've been working together for a very long time. And he's done all of the diagrams for my Cabinet of Curiosities course. So he has all of those at his fingertips. And he's studied it along the way with me, so he understands how these were put together originally from a design perspective. So I told Noah that I wanted to do a 4 seasons casket. That would be the design around the bottom of the thing. And you can see that here. And there were many of these that were done in the period where you had Winter here, Old Man Winter, and his cat and his, it's the fire and the bellows to keep the fire going, and the firewood, and all of the trees are stripped of their leaves. So you've got winter on this side, and then you have spring, and you have summer here, and then you have fall on this side right here. And now we had found these motifs on actual caskets and mirror frames and pictures. and we were able to copy these motifs. So we had some of these basic motifs, and we also had been spending a lot of time in the course finding out what else would be around those if you were to look at engravings of the period. So we had a good feeling for that. And then I told Noah that I really wanted to do and I'll show this as a picture, I really wanted to do a mermaid in the grotto at the top. And I wasn't sure what to put on the back, but because these always have stories around on the major panels, that I would need to have something on the back that would be kind of like part of a story. And so in the end, as I was discussing it with him, I decided that I would do hope, love, and charity on it. No, hope, faith, hope, and love. Yeah, so we have faith here, we have hope here, and we have love, which is represented by charity here on the back. And so he had that kind of direction to begin with. And I'll show these more carefully. So he did a basic drawing. What we do is we have a layout of the casket, and he did some basic, just rough sketches on them. And in one of his ideas was, hey, Trish, let's do the friezes. Let's make the friezes be, summer, spring, fall. But then we have, what are we going to do on the back? He had the mermaid swimming in it. He had come up with some great things like adding a turkey. Often there's a familiar, we'll call it, with a person, like a small animal with a person. And so he had a sheep with spring. All makes total sense. Easter, spring, put a sheep there. And so I took a look at this initial drawing, and I was like, not so sure about the friezes here going across, especially the slope ones. I wasn't so sure of that. So he did me a second one, because I think he had a peacock in one of them, and I wasn't liking the peacock, didn't know what to put in the other. So I said, hey, I like the kingfisher and the parrot that we often see on these. And so he did me another drawing where he was including those, and he changed out what he was putting on the front, where he had previously had a cornucopia. And the more I thought about the cornucopia, I was like, oh my God, that would be so fun to embroider. So I said, Noah, go back to the cornucopia. And often we'll leave these small friezes empty because we're not too sure what to put in. They're kind of space fillers. There's a whole bunch of them that are that the casket drawers of the time period drew, and they just used them over and over and over again because they're a very hard to design space. So then he will take and make a larger drawing for me, in this particular case, the cornucopia. And the cornucopia represented spring and summer, so you had flowers on the one side and the fruits on the other. And I thought, oh God, that would be so much fun to do with three-dimensional flowers and three-dimensional fruits. So yes, we're going to go for it. Even though it was an original element, it wasn't something that was using elements that existed already in the embroideries. There are some cornucopias that are in stumpwork embroideries, but this was, his own drawings. Then we started looking at specifics for some of the other doors. Here you can see the spring and the summer. He had one of them spring all seated, but then summer was going to be standing, and I just didn't really like that. I liked his idea of putting a tree in the middle of the doors, and so you have spring on one side and you have the fruit in summer on the tree on the other, but I just didn't like the woman. And I don't know, for some reason the lamb just didn't hit me. The other thing when we're doing this is you have to be very careful of what we're putting in certain places, because we have the hinges to deal with and other hardware that we're going to put on the piece, so we have to make sure that it's going to be flat embroidery behind that. The other thing is that sometimes he'll add, because they did, they'll sprinkle like bugs and little frogs and things like that all over the place, which is great if you're working on 10 stitch, because you just change the color to make that on there. But if you're going to be working in stump work, you actually have to have a lot less on the ground, because you're going to be using interesting threads that are very hard to stop, let's say, silk gimps or silk pearls for the background grass. And it's really hard to put over that a three-dimensional piece of stitching. So sometimes you simplify it and have less is more in that case. So he came up with a seated woman for summer, and I really liked that quite a bit more. I thought it was just so much more balanced, and so we continued to move forward, but I think we had to take away some of the small items, like the little caterpillar went away, and on this side there was a little snail, and those, just as I said, I was envisioning much more intricate materials on the ground, and so we had to get rid of those. Moving on to the top, we have the sketch for the secondary sketch for the grotto, and then we start putting in some of the motifs we already own that we had done in Cabinet of Curiosities, traced off of Caskets, and you can see how we're starting to flesh out the top so that we can do the final drawing. This is the back with Faith, Hope, and Love as a raw drawing, and then we're starting to drop in those characters that exist in our drawing database, and then continue to flush out by making the line drawings for the rest of the slope top there with the castle, as well as the, I told him I really wanted a nice big canopy in the back because that would be fun to embroider. Again, a lot of this is about fun for Tricia to embroider, because if you're going to spend 3 years embroidering something, it better be fun. You better be looking forward to, oh, I can't wait till I do that motif. So that ended up with a full design like this, and now we had to kind of go through and find some friezes that would work with it, and that ended up with this particular design, which then I published and said, anybody want to stitch this along with me as a class? And quite a few people did and are still working on the piece. So now let's look at this in detail. So you can see the cornucopia, which is fabulous. I used a silk gimp here to make the basket, and I made it as a slip, which then allowed me to place it over some stuffing, which then allowed me to use all these really big three-dimensional flowers that I was making with needle lace. And over here, did needle lace over forms, cotton forms, so that we could have these three-dimensional berries and pears, etc. There's a lot of different threads in here. We have silk pearls up here. A lot of the edges of the flowers are worked by taking a silk pearl. I do this for people. I sell this. Take silk pearl, expand it, so stretch it, then run it through a series of rollers. And then what that does is it gives you this really neat loopy edge, and you can do needle lace on that. And that gives you this nice little scalloped edge. So we actually call it the scallop edge trim. You can see here, let's see. Looking down, we have spring and summer. And with spring, I decided to give her a little doggy. I thought that was a much more appropriate little animal, or at least maybe I should say I wanted to embroider the dog more, because I think I think one of the things is we needed to move her slightly in the design so we'd have room for this hinge, and that made it such that the sheep was too, the lamb was too crowded here, and so we had to take him out. But I liked the lamb. I thought that would be a lot of fun to stitch. And so if you look up at the top frieze here, you will see that there is a lamb there, and we actually did that specifically. We designed all these friezes around, as we'll go around it, such that there was always a central little animal or bug in it that would be fun to stitch. And the little lamb was quite fun to stitch because I made a thread for that for everybody who took the class. It's a gimp pearl. It's something we don't have on the market right now because it's very tough to make, and they can only make it in small lengths. But you wind a gimp on a silk oval thread using a machine, and it makes a coil. And then you can couch that down, and it makes it kind of a bumpy, bumpy coil, which looks a lot like, sheep's wool that's all spirally. If you go down here and you look more at the spring and the summer, you see that I have all of this fruit coming off of the tree. These are pears, and these are all needle laced onto a cotton pear form, as well as the berries that she has in her hand. And she has a little basket of fruit. And that was another one of those things that I was just like, oh, this is going to be so much fun to embroider, to pick the fruits that will go into it and to try to make a basket that's three-dimensional enough to stand off the surface using needle lace. All of the clouds are made using something called silk soutache, and I put that over a very thick needle and couch it around the needle and then pull the needle out, and that makes it a nice little bump above the surface. And that's what gives it this kind of fluffiness look to it, and I found that on a casket at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. There is silk lacet, which has been sewn together and made into a rickrack. So you take the silk lacet and you pull one of the silk threads in the braid, and then it rickracks the whole thing. And then you can lay it next to each other and you can whip it together to make kind of like a fabric. And that's what's been done for her little cloak here that she's wearing. You see silk lacet here on Summer being looped like it's the ribbons that they were using a lot of at that period. And I don't know if you can see here in this blue dress, but you can actually make supplementary patterns in needle lace. So buttonhole stitch has a unit size, and there's something called up and down buttonhole stitch. So it's 2 units. Buttonhole's 1 unit, up and down buttonholes 2 units. And it's kind of like knitting. You can make patterns. So you can do like 1 buttonhole, 1 up and down, 1 buttonhole, 1 up and down, and then the next row, shift it by 1. And it'll start to make a diagonal in the pattern. Not the colors. This is a pattern, and I think we can show a nice close-up here where you can see that there's a pattern inside of the needle lace itself. So one of the other really cool things about this dress, when you peel back all of that patterned needle lace, is that you see that there's another underskirt, a petticoat underneath it. And that petticoat is made of what we call the strawberry fabric. It is another kind of needle lace, and it's one of the most unusual needle laces in that you can carry multiple needles at the same time with different colors in order to make a pattern inside of it. And I'll show here a picture really up close of this strawberry fabric and then describe how the fabric is made, or the needle lace is made. So you use Venetian point stitch to make this needle lace. It's not the easiest stitch that there is, but because it has this kind of little knotted loop in it, you can carry an additional thread of a different color. So when you're doing a row, you'll use 2 needles, one of the background color and one of the color that you want to make the little pattern in the needle lace. And as you're going across, you work the background color, catching in the bottom of the stitch the extra thread, the colored thread for the motif in it. And when you get to the place where you want to put the motif, you switch the needles. You let the background color be carried, and you pick up the needle with the colored thread in it and work a stitch with that. And you can continue to do that across the entire fabric and do, anything you want, polka dots, triangles, little flowers, or in this particular case, strawberries. And for some reason, strawberries seem to be most often done. You'll see it with either a cream background and then the pink and the green, or a silver background and the pink and the green for the strawberries. And you see it all over stump work, all over the place. But it's of course one of those things where it's kind of challenging, but it's really interesting. And I think that for some of us, we've gotten to that point where we're really, you know, we want to do something interesting. You don't want to do the same needle lace over this entire casket. What you want to do is do something different every time that you're doing something. And so the strawberry fabric was something different and fun to do. I think I want to show the another side of the piece. Coming here to the back, to the side where I have fall. And fall has some cool things to it. His garment is worked with a pattern in it. The needle lace has a pattern in it. And so does his breeches. He not only has a pattern in the brown breeches, but there are two colors being used. So you get this color stripe, but also the textural stripe in the needle lace as well. And we have a fun turkey. The turkey was made such that you have layers of needle lace feathers that overlap each other to make this really fun turkey. And I wanted to do something for his body that was a little unusual. You know how birds have kind of an iridescent feathering. And so in that case, what I did is I did trellis stitch, which is one of the needle lace stitches, but I used two colors in the needle at the same time. Created a little bit of a tension issue when I was doing it. You know, you had to make sure that both of the threads were under the same amount of tension so that you didn't have some sort of little bit of thread kind of sticking up in the stitch. But it really created a really interesting look to it because I used brown and a really bright blue in the same needle. And that gave that kind of iridescent-y look to his body. Other interesting things on this side are in the frieze up here, we have silk gimp being used on the rust-colored flowers and the blue flowers over here. I'm using silk gimp in a set of stitches that I had decoded from spot samplers where they usually use gold thread. But silk gimp can be used in its place because it has a very similar stiffness as gold thread, so it holds the stitches in the same way. And so I did that for these blue flowers and the rust flowers. I also did it on the other side. I'm going to quickly turn the piece just to kind of give it some symmetry. You can see here in the rust flowers on this frieze and the blue flowers on this frieze, also gold work stitches but done in silk gimp. And the silk gimp is passing through the fabric. Back to the side with fall on it, and we go up to the slope panel. And I have, oh, actually I wanted to talk something about the bottom and fall here. This mound right here is made using two different types of pearl in the same color because I have all the pearl made for me. I can say, hey, I want this one now in this color, I want this in this color, because just as long as I buy the batch, you know, I can have it. So I thought that this would be a really interesting thing to do where I alternated a smooth silk pearl, and this is in a color called light bronze, with something called silk check. And silk check is like a pearl, except that the spring doesn't have a round cross section like the silk pearl does. It has a triangular cross section. And that is made by taking a needle, which is really just a die. It's a round stainless steel piece that has a needle sticking out of it that's been milled such that it's a triangular cross section and it tapers down. And you take the silk covered wire and the needle turns to wrap the silk wire around it. This is done in Benton & Johnson. And I think I'm going to show some video of that here too. And so as the triangle is formed, the whole die rotates as well. So the apex of the triangle that is being formed rotates around the pearl. And you can see that by looking down it, and you can see that there is a triangular cross section, but that it turns. And it makes the most interesting texture of a coil. Usually this is done in gold so that it shines. But you can do it as a silk pearl. And that's what I've done down here, and I have couched them in alternating, so you get that texture and smooth for this mound. Looking up here, you remember in the design process, I wanted to do these birds, and there were particular motifs that were drawn over and over again of the parrot and the kingfisher. And I really wanted to do those, and I wanted to do them such that they had all the little teeny feathers coming off of it in needle lace, as you see there. And of course, there's nice little berries on it. So, how about taking a little bit of a tour inside the casket now? And there's a lot of surprises inside this casket. The first thing is to open up the doors. I think please put in the comments if you'd like to hear more about how the boxes were constructed and how the project came about, because there were couple years worth of engineering and design work and investigation of caskets and x-ray and all kinds of things that happened just to get to the physical box, including the locks, which is what, it reminded me, because I, was about ready to open up the box here. And each one of the locks is uniquely made because they don't exist on the market right now. So, and that's an indication of the kind of lock it is. It's got a little lever here. So you open it up, and it has these inner doors here, panels, that are done in silk pearl work. And this is something I had seen, of course, on pieces, and a lot of the pieces that you see, because it's a copper wire that's inside for the old embroideries, the copper gets a little corroded over time, and it makes the silk that is wrapped around the wire a little kind of dusty green or kind of grayish looking. And so the texture might look really interesting when you see it on a piece of, 400-year-old embroidery, but the color's not there. And I wanted to do this again. And so, let's see, 12 years ago or so, I begged and worked and begged and begged and tried to figure out, solve problems and everything with Bill Barnes to get him to make me silk pearl. He was convinced that it would not go on the market, meaning that people wouldn't buy it because it'd be too expensive. And I said, no, in America, women want silk. They don't want polyester. We don't want to embroider with polyester. And so finally, he made me a couple colors, and we got the log jam kind of done, and we started really making it. And now we have it in many different sizes even, which is really exciting, and in a full color range, shaded color range. And so these two doors inside are done with silk pearl work. It's just so textural. It's so exciting. I just love silk pearls. And being something that really hasn't been around for a couple hundred years, it's exciting to be able to embroider with it. So there's some extras to some of these. In both of the flowers, I have taken, and in different sizes of silk pearl, I've expanded and rolled it out to give me this scallop edge, which then I can use as a textural difference between the silk pearls and the silk scallop edge to get some really neat techniques. There's a whole bunch of different techniques of silk pearl work in this. And then at the bottom of the doors are a passementary material. One is called chardon, and the other one's called bouclette. And those are used in tassel making for the little skirt on the tassel, the little girdle, I would say, girdle on the tassel. And when I saw it at a passementary company that we were working with, I looked at it, I said, oh my God, that would make the best green grass ever, if you could make it in greens and shade it. And so we asked for that to be made because, you know, who wants to do velvet stitch like over and over and over again and cut it? That's a lot of work. Satin stitch over a bar, cut it to make something kind of like furry, like grass. And this, you can just stitch it down. And so that's at the bottom of both of the baskets. So there is a huge surprise in the top of this casket, and it really hasn't been shown off much yet. Mostly only the people in the class know about this surprise in the top of the casket. So let me get my key in here. Not the easiest thing in the world from where I'm sitting. And open it up, and there is a garden in the top of my casket. And I can take the garden out of my casket so you can see it even better. Here we are. So I have this little garden with all these little bouquets of flowers. And there is a nice little path through the garden. And of course, that's that little chardon coupé at the bottom here that has been couched down to make this gorgeous velvety look to the garden grass. And I have a fountain, and on the fountain is a little birdie. Now, I hope you can see the flowers here. I'll show some pictures of the flowers up close. There are a whole bunch of different flowers on this. Mainly, the flowers are made out of lacet, which is this slightly over 1/8 of an inch flat braid that used to be finger braided at the time period, and they made flowers like this out of it by whip stitching together the braids. They'd fold them on themselves in little serpentine patterns. Hopefully you can see with some of the leaves here that you can serpentine it and whip stitch it together, and that's like really fast. It's not needle lace. It's just taking a braid and making a leaf out of it, connecting it to some silk covered wire. You can do the same to make petals, and then you connect them together with the same color silk, connect it to a silk covered wire, and all of a sudden you have all kinds of different flowers in these little bouquets that I've put onto my garden. So there are actually a couple of free projects. I think there's one free project for a pansy on my website. So you can download the instructions and see how that is done. And I've actually been thinking of doing a class on how to make these kind of bouquets. So if anybody's interested, please make some commentary in the comments on whether or not you think that's a great idea or not. And I might get one together. How to do like the little, you see there's little strawberries there. There's all kinds of little extra threads added to the centers of the flowers. But they're really fun to make, and they made lots of them. And in a couple episodes, I'll be visiting the Ashmolean Museum, and they have a collection of these little posies made with these lacet braids, and which are just so sweet. And they were found in caskets all the time. So the girls seem to make them and give them away. There's actually a bunch of books on how to make the lacets. Braids, the finger braiding. You put the loops over your fingers and you pass them back and forth to make the braid. But there are some manuscripts by women who wrote down patterns, and they have little pieces of braid in them. There are some at the V&A. There are some at the Metropolitan Museum of Fine Arts. That's actually been digitized. You can read it if you can read the pattern. But in one of them, and there's a great braid master, Naomi, I'm trying to remember her last name. Is it Tarrant? No, Naomi Tarrant. I'm trying to remember the last, anyways, I'll figure out who it is and talk about it in a different episode. But you can actually put alphabets. You can write in them. And I've been doing some research on that, and sometime in the future, I'll show you some of the pieces where there are hidden messages in the braids on the stump work itself, which is too cool. So my garden goes back in there. Actually, the garden fits into its own little tray, and there's nothing underneath it right now, but there is space for something to go underneath it. You can open up, gotta get my lock on here, key. You can open up the top here. Let's get that one closed well. And you have a mirror, and you have all kinds of goodies in this piece. We have the bottles, and if you're interested in finding out more about how these kind of things happen, you just don't go on Amazon and buy this. This was a multi-year research project to figure out how to make the bottles again, and to work with people who were historic glass blowers to make the bottles. And there's a whole video on that on my website. I haven't done a video yet on the ink wells. So you see there would be ink inside of it. And the pounce pots. There would be pounce inside of this one right here for writing letters. And there would be a quill in here, and they would usually wrap it with silk in a decorative way, kind of like how girls have wrapped pencils with yarn in the more recent past, but they did the same thing with quills, and they were inside, and there's a couple caskets that have those in them. But things like this come out. There is a pin cushion in here, and then there's a little secret drawer inside of it. I'm going to put these aside for a couple minutes, talk about them. But there are secret drawers. Things come out like this, and there are drawers. Maybe I'll film some of this being opened for you so you can see inside of it, because I can't kind of do that. There's another drawer inside of here. So let me talk about some of the little projects that were in the top here. This one right here is a sweet little pin cushion. It's actually a pattern that's available for free on my teaching website, and it is inspired by the little pin cushion. Actually, it's a lot bigger than it's about this big, that Martha Edlin made and was in her casket. If you're not as familiar with who Martha Edlin is, you can take a look at her embroideries, look at some of the links at the bottom of this video. You can look at all of her embroideries, which are at the V&A, and are half of them are constantly on display in the British galleries. And I made a pilgrimage there recently and filmed an episode, so that's coming soon. But if you're interested in making this, look it up. I actually have some kits now for this again with the silk velvet background. Another piece here is also inspired by Martha Edlin's other pin cushion that she made. The patterns are not exactly the same on either of them, but they're very similar to it. And what, take a look closer at this, what is really unusual about this pin cushion is that it is 10 stitch and queen stitch, but it's on silk satin fabric. So it's not done on a counted ground. And I had to look at a lot of high-resolution pictures of her piece to figure out how she went about doing it. Obviously, waste canvas. And it was a really interesting project to do. I did it for the Cabinet of Curiosities main course. And I'm thinking of pulling it out as another little mini course just on this project. And so if you're interested in something like that, please put it in the comments so that I know that people might be interested in doing that. And then there actually is a little piece of haul in this casket. It's a little blue envelope. Terribly exciting, right? Well, inside of it, this is something that I got on auction a couple years ago when I was doing a whole bunch of research on Martha Edlin. And this little copper trade token is from 1667. There's only 3 of them known to exist of this particular trade token, London trade token. It was used as small change that businesses would mint themselves. And what's really interesting about this one is Martha So when I found this, I was like flipping over the moon because nobody knew that it existed. And so there is information on this little trade token, which has allowed me to find out her entire life story. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later on another episode. And some big things are coming because of that. So this is really precious haul to me, and it lives in my casket at the moment. Maybe it should be in a secret drawer. But someday it will no longer live with me. I will donate it to be with some of Martha's pieces because it just seems kind of so appropriate. So into more of the casket. And if we have to get up here and pull open, there's a little button back here for the secret lock here, and you find 3 drawers and pull them out. This one has a silk wrapped card on the front of it that I did, and inside of it has a little gift from Katie to me, which is very special. This one has a tent stitched front, which tells you that I did it, plus the years that I did it over, 2020 to 2022. We open this one right here, also in this silk wrapped card. Has a little interesting shape. And if you have seen cabinets being opened before, you'll know that this type of a little shape here to the front of a drawer is an indicator of a secret drawer, as is when the depth of the drawer is not the same as the depth of the casket. You also know that there are secret drawers behind things. So we can feel in here and find the secret drawer. If I can get it out, there it is. And a ring holder, which I probably should put something in there. Maybe some reproduction Renaissance jewelry, right? And then we have another secret drawer here. That's where those are those kind of aha moments, right? When you want to see what's inside of it. I should really put my coin in one of these. Although I probably would freak out that I had lost it, so I shouldn't do that. So we'll put these back together here. Open up the big one here. You see a bunch of other little projects that I had done for Cabinet of Curiosities, including a little pin pad where I was trying to say, hey, look, you can change your colors by shifting in the colorway, so you have an antique look and as new look. And then opening these drawers, and yes, there are things in the drawers. This particular little cutie cute set here are little faux gloves. I like that. And they are made with the lace-it, just like the flowers are made with the lace-it. And this pattern is actually on my website as well. I'll put something in the commentary so you can find those free patterns. And this is inspired by a set of gloves that Martha Edlin did for herself and put into her casket as well. And I'll put the link to those so you can see them online. Open up here, and we have little bullion snakes. These are the first little bullion covering. They're very glittery, aren't they? They're the first project a girl would do if she was doing this technique in class. It's wire, which is wrapped with cotton, and then it is covered in silk, and then you take a bullion, a gilt or a silver bullion, and you stretch it way out, and you wrap it around it. And that's what gives you this kind of glittery look to them. Now, there are a few that exist, which are Adam and Eve, and of course, this is the snake that goes around the tree for Adam and Eve. There are some little deer, little dogs that are made like this in various collections coming out of caskets, and they're sweet as anything. Wheat sheath. So this was a technique that and it's a free pattern that's on my website as well if you want to try that out. And here we have a little scissors holder, little glove, which you put your scissors in. And then we have 2 more secret drawers behind here. I'm not sure that there's anything in them right now. Maybe I should put the little coin in them, shouldn't I? But then everybody would know where it is anyways, because I just put this up on YouTube. It's not like, of course, it wasn't like, they all have very similar secret drawers, almost all of them. They're like the same places all the time. So you kind of know that the brothers could find the secret stuff. It wasn't really a surprise. But putting all these things back into the box. Closing the doors. Take out the key. I hope you're as intrigued with embroidered cabinets as I am. Thinking about how we love to take a look at what's in the drawers. We love to look at what's in the drawers of their pieces. Thinking about being in their shoes and understanding what their lives were like. I hope that you watch future episodes where I'm going to talk about some new and interesting developments regarding Martha Edlin and her pieces, which all have come about from that little piece of haul that I have, the little coin that her husband made, which opened up her entire life. And I'm going to be very excited to talk about the projects that I'm doing regarding Martha in the near future. So if you like this kind of content, please let me know. Please subscribe. Above it has a very three-dimensional snail here. And this snail you see on a lot of pieces of stump work, this very stuffed snail in this kind of rainbow colors that are coiled up. It's like taking a worm and coiling it up and stitching it down to the fabric. Well, to make that, you take and make a long strip where you do color row, color row, color row, color row in trellis stitch. And then when you cut it off of the support material, which is usually contact paper over muslin, you flip it over. And the trellis stitch on the back is this kind of vertical long stitch. And you then put that around some stuffing, whip stitch it together, and then coil it up to make this. So this is actually the back face of the needle lace that is showing on this snail right here, which is pretty interesting. The back of the piece has things like this really fun little squirrel at the top. He was a fun guy to make. Also have in the middle slope panel, I have the jaguar and the lion. There's all kinds of extra little things going on here. The jaguar is actually, his head is detached from the piece, as well as his little tongue coming out. They always drew it with a tongue coming out, and his ears. So I had to make him as one piece of needle lace for the front, and then a partial piece of needle lace for the back of his head, connect it together, and then stuff it so that the head could be detached from the background. You see here that this has been worked also in the 17th century style versus the 20th century style of stump work. Jane Nicholas is well known for teaching the 20th century style, where you pre-plan where you want detached things to be, and then you might put a dot or where your attachment point would be, but you don't draw the whole pattern on the fabric. These were all drawn by a draftsperson and sold in a shop. And so the design was complete on the fabric. And then the needleworker, the girl, purchased it, put it on a slate frame, and started working on it and making decisions. Was she going to do it in tent stitch? Was she going to do the whole thing in satin stitch? Was she going to do stump work? Now, if she's doing stump work, then she may have areas that are detached. And, well, the drawing is on the background, just like you can see here with my jaguar. And so either you have the black lines showing behind this detached piece, or you have to stitch it. So you have a lot of these, on these original pieces, you have these shadow images behind things. And that adds to the authenticity, it adds to the look of it, these shadow images. And so I did do shadow images on my piece. So you have this kind of satin stitched jaguar shadow behind his head. And you'll see that all over the place, where you have a satin stitched leaf. Let's see here. You can see See right up here at the top, you have a satin stitched leaf behind a needle laced attached leaf. Another interesting thing about, we got this beautiful castle here. I think the castle even has a pattern in the needle lace to give some more effect. We have, let's see what else. Oh, here in the mound where we for the lion, I have alternated a braid which has been pulled. One of the strands have been pulled to rickrack it with non-rickracked material. So it kind of gives you this interesting stripy effect, like the grass is sticking straight up. So always looking for ways to do that type of a thing. Down below we have a cherub, or flying in between the sun and the moon. And there's quite a lot of interesting threads, gold threads involved there, as well as more lacet, which is the braid, the very thin braid, which has been rickracked and laid over itself in order to make the clouds. Going to the top of the piece, and I'll have to show a picture of this, there's a lot going on here. Whenever you see a piece that is a grotto on a piece of stump work, the grotto is there almost as a place like to do fantasy threads, because that's the place on the whole piece that has the most unusual threads that you've ever seen. And I love looking at them through a microscope, because I'm like, whoa, what the heck is that? You know, never seen that before. And I think the reason why is because they're trying to get the effect of a piece of granite and many different pieces of granite, right? Because you have to distinguish all the different rocks from each other. And so they're looking for rough texture, but they're also looking for like the flecks of color that you get in granite. And gardening and making faux grottos at important houses was actually a thing in the 17th century. And so people would have been familiar with taking big pieces of granite and putting them in places to make these kind of like little small grottos for fish ponds, etc. So you find all kinds of threads like striped silk pearl. That means a silk pearl that maybe is in a tan, and then there is a blue wrapped around it as well to give it a stripe. And then they might take that and stretch it out and feed another color up the middle, and then have a second silk pearl that also has a stripe but a different color set, stretch that out, shove something up the middle of it, another color of thread, and then twist them together. And then couch them down. I mean, that's really complicated, but from an embroiderer's point of view, that's pretty fun to do something like that. So you're like thinking, how can I mix colors together, and what can I do with the textures to do that? And so you'll see that in some of these types of rocks. I've got these brown and blue rocks here. I've taken for many different rocks, I've taken silk pearls and I've expanded them in multiple colors, and I've run soie ovale down the middle of it in order to give it a little bit of color that's peeking through, and then couched that down. I've also taken striped silk gimp, which is something that I had made for grottos, in a shaded set of colors, and I might use that in some rocks to make, like using it to do like French knots over here near the mermaid's head. There are other rocks where it is a cordon, which is a silk wrapped gimp, but it's striped again, but that's made for passementerie. And so we had a company make us 7 different colors of that, colorways of that, so that we could use them for rocks. What other kind of interesting things do I have on this? I used a lot of small, very tiny silk pearl in loops to make a kind of a loopy rock. And then you have, for the water, going into the water, I have taken a gilt strip called number 11S plate, and had it wrapped with a dark blue silk thread, and then I ran it through a little Lego machine that I have, which makes it undulated, called crenellated, and then that's coming out of this pink rock here into the water. the water is made up of a whole bunch of different threads in water stripes. And that is, I have something called facette, which is a serpentine thread covered in blue silk, and it has a wire in it, so you can shape it into different things. There's a thinner version of that that doesn't have the wire in it, which is called serpentine. There is the crenellated silk plate in a couple colors. There's also regular silk gimp couched down as well. So all of these different layers to give the interesting rippling of water was the effect that I was going for. Other interesting things on this top piece are all of my trees with the fruits sticking up from it. You often will find on the top of a casket something that's a little over the top and kind of sticking out more than you think it should, because it can on the top of something. And then the last surprise, which is the frog. And the frog I had made out of silk gimp and wire a couple years ago for my Cabinet of Curiosities course when I was doing instructions on how to make a detached frog using goldwork stitches. And he has these little eyeballs, little glass eyeballs as well. And he'd been sitting in my box for a while of just little units that I had made for teaching. And when I was doing this, there was a frog on the piece, on the diagram, and I said, well, I wonder if my frog will fit on it. And he doesn't quite fit on it, and that is almost even better, because he's like, it's like he's jumped out of a pond onto my embroidery, and he's hanging off the edge. He's not even, he's the gold edge of the casket is underneath his legs, because he's just hopped onto it in realism. And I actually just really love that. And it's kind of a surprise to people who take a look at the piece for the first time.